These two murderers, these two monsters, ruined my entire life.
Michael Garrett, the father of Aniya Day-Garrett, spoke at the sentencing Wednesday of Sierra Day and Deontay Lewis, who were both convicted earlier this month of his 4-year-old daughter.
When paramedics arrived at the apartment, they found her, already lifeless. A child, just 4 years old, her body so emaciated it resembled a skeleton. They'd been called to save her, but it was too late. What they didn't know was that this wasn't the first time she'd cried out for help. Aniya Day-Garrett had pleaded with anyone who would listen, but each cry was met with silence. What no one could have imagined was that just hours before, her mother and her mother's boyfriend had been enjoying burritos and shopping for cleaning supplies at Walmart, while Aniya lay dying in the apartment. This is the story of a little girl who fought desperately to be heard, only to be silenced by the very people who were supposed to protect her. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel, they help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community that believes every story deserves to be told, and no victim should ever be forgotten. Now let's get into it. Aniya Day-Garrett was born on September 2nd, 2013, in Euclid, Ohio, to Sierra Day and Michael Garrett. From the beginning, her life was marked by instability. When Aniya was still under 2 years old, her parents separated, and the fractured family dynamic set the stage for the challenges that would follow. Sierra was granted full custody, while Michael, her biological father, tried everything he could to maintain a relationship with his daughter. He filed petitions, made phone calls, and showed up at visitation times, each time hoping for a few moments with Aniya. Michael's fight to remain involved was constant, but it was a battle against a system that seemed to make it harder for him to reach his daughter, rather than help him protect her. Aniya's early years, despite the turmoil at home, were full of life. She was described as a bright, energetic child who loved to sing and dance. Her favorite color was pink, and her energy seemed to light up any room she entered. She had a contagious laughter that made everyone around her smile, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her home life. But behind her laughter, a quiet storm was growing. During Michael's visitation times, things began to change. Aniya started to show signs of injury, bruises on her chest, and marks that didn't seem to add up. When Michael noticed these, he began to ask questions. Sierra, however, explained the injuries away as minor accidents, dismissing them as things that happened in the life of a child. She assured Michael that Aniya was fine, but Michael's concerns grew with each visit, and in response to his growing concerns, Sierra filed a restraining order against Michael, accusing him of harassment and claiming he was overstepping in his limited role as a father.
You go home to your mommy or you want to stay with me, baby? You want to go home to your mommy? What you mean, no? Huh? What you mean, no? You want to stay with me? You want to stay with Daddy? You sure? I love you. What? I love you more, honey. Daddy's princess. Of course you can stay with me, Mama. I want you to stay with me. I want you to come live with me, honey. You hear me? And Daddy gonna make that possible. Believe that in Jesus' name.
As a result, Michael's access to Aniya became more restricted. He was no longer allowed to visit her without a third party present, either a social worker or a court monitor. This not only made Michael feel even more isolated from his daughter, but also marked the beginning of a difficult legal battle that would leave him feeling powerless to protect her. Despite these mounting issues, Michael's love for Aniya never wavered. He continued to fight for the custody he believed he was entitled to, desperate to ensure she was safe. But every time he thought he was getting closer to a solution, something in the system or his relationship with Sierra stood in the way. Desperate to protect his daughter, Michael began photographing the injuries. He documented everything, every bruise, every cut, every scrape. He needed proof, and he wasn't going to let Sierra's dismissive explanations keep him from taking action. But despite his increasing concerns, Sierra's response remained the same. She downplayed it all, telling Michael that his daughter was simply fine and that these marks were just part of growing up. Michael's frustration grew. Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services, CCFS, had already been notified, and yet nothing had been done. He continued to file complaints with the agency, hoping they would step in, but every time, the response was the same. No action, no intervention. He was left in a constant state of helplessness, unable to protect Aniya, as he watched the situation worsen. Meanwhile, Aniya's behavior began to change. The bright, energetic child who once loved to sing and dance was now withdrawn and emotionally distant. She seemed to shut down in Michael's presence, unable to express the joy she once did. Her once lively spirit had been dimmed by the and neglect she endured daily. Daycare workers at Harbor Crest Daycare started noticing Aniya's injuries too. They saw bruises, abrasions, and burns on her body, marks that appeared almost daily. These workers didn't stay silent. They filed 18 reports to their supervisors, detailing the injuries they saw. In one report, a daycare worker noted that Sierra frequently dismissed the concerns, claiming that Aniya was a liar. F. In May of 2017, Aniya arrived at daycare with bumps on her head and a scrape on her face. That day, she told a caretaker, "Mommy pushed me down the steps." Sierra offered an explanation, saying that Aniya had simply fallen at a park. But the injuries seemed too severe to be explained away so easily. A few days later, Aniya arrived at daycare complaining of a headache. When the staff examined her, they found blisters on her scalp and dried blood inside her ear. Sierra explained it away as an allergic reaction to a baby wash. However, she quickly changed her story, saying that the injuries might have been caused by Aniya's braid being too tight. But when Aniya was pulled aside, her story didn't match Sierra's. Aniya said, "Mommy hit me, Mommy hurt me." That's when the owner of the daycare facility made the decision to notify the police, and Aniya was taken to the hospital for a physical evaluation. Despite the hospital visits, medical evaluations, and witness reports, Aniya was sent back to her mother's care. The concerns for Aniya only deepened when Sierra started dating a man named Deontay Lewis in July of 2017. Deontay had no criminal record, but he was far from the protector Aniya needed. Family members described Deontay as controlling, and once he entered the picture, things at home began to take a darker turn. Michael, who had been made aware of the reports from daycare and medical visits, also witnessed the violence firsthand. During a visit to Sierra's apartment in September 2017, he discovered bruises on Aniya's chest and back. On a separate occasion, Michael noticed that Aniya had a rotting tooth, a clear sign that she had been in pain for a long time without receiving medical attention. He took photographs of the injuries and filed his own report with Cleveland police. Despite Michael's efforts, law enforcement failed to take appropriate action, leaving Aniya in a dangerous home environment. The violence continued unchecked. Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services received an emergency referral about allegations of violence and neglect involving Aniya in December of 2017. A social worker visited Sierra's apartment, where she observed more bruises and burns on Aniya's body. Yet, for some reason, the social worker deemed the child's living conditions acceptable after confirming that the utilities, food, and basic necessities were met. The investigation was closed without further action. Sierra, aware that she was under the scrutiny of law enforcement, made a decision. She transferred Aniya to a new daycare, Get Ready, Set Grow preschool, where Sierra worked as a teacher. This move allowed Sierra to better shield her daughter's injuries from proper documentation. By this time, Aniya's condition had worsened significantly. The staff at the new daycare noticed that Aniya appeared malnourished, sickly, and emotionally withdrawn. When Sierra's colleagues confronted her about Aniya's low weight, she dismissed it, claiming Aniya had always been just a skinny child. However, the daycare's minimal supervision made it easier for Sierra to hide the virus, and soon, Cleveland PD's investigation into Sierra was closed altogether in January of 2018. Despite hospital visits, photographic evidence, witness statements, and even Aniya's own words, the case against Sierra was deemed unsubstantiated. Then on March 11, 2018, Deontay Lewis dialed 911. His voice, disturbingly calm, reported that Aniya Day-Garrett, his girlfriend's 4-year-old daughter, had fallen from the toilet and was struggling to breathe. The dispatcher immediately instructed Deontay to perform CPR, but the call was eerily devoid of urgency. Both Deontay and Sierra Day, who later took the phone, were unnervingly calm. There was no panic, no sense of the desperation that should accompany such a call. As the operator continued to guide them through CPR, neither Deontay nor Sierra seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Sierra, in particular, was remarkably nonchalant, even as she informed the dispatcher that she had placed her hand to Aniya's nose and could feel no air coming out. Despite the operator's clear instructions, the response was slow and disjointed, leading to more questions about the couple's involvement. How could they be so calm? Why wasn't there any urgency to help the child who was clearly struggling for life? Something felt off. When paramedics arrived at the Cultural Garden Apartments in Euclid, Ohio, they were immediately hit by the sharp stench of bleach. As they entered the apartment, the scene they found was bizarre. Aniya's body, cold and lifeless, was discovered underneath an air conditioner, a detail that instantly raised suspicions. It was as though someone had been trying to mask the smell of decay, hoping to hide the overwhelming stench of death. The apartment itself was in disarray, urine-soaked bedding, half-eaten food still sitting out, and most disturbingly, court papers, specifically the custody battle documents between Michael Garrett and Sierra Day, torn up and thrown carelessly into the trash. But the most disturbing discovery was Aniya's physical condition. She was severely emaciated, her small frame resembling that of a child much younger. Her body showed clear signs of prolonged neglect, bruises, burns, and bed sores, all of which were direct evidence of the abuse she had suffered in the months leading up to her death. It was evident Aniya had not just been neglected, she had been butchered, and her body bore the evidence. While investigating the apartment, authorities made an unexpected and horrific discovery. They recovered a tape recorded by Sierra Day and Deontay Lewis on March 10, 2018, just the day before Aniya's death. The tape found on the couple's phones was recorded while Aniya was dying in the next room. The discovery of this tape shocked investigators to their core. It painted a horrifying picture of the couple's indifference to the suffering of a child in their care. While Aniya lay fighting for her life, Sierra and Deontay were captured on film, clearly unconcerned with the child's well-being. The autopsy of Aniya Day-Garrett confirmed the worst of what investigators had feared. The cause of death was determined to be cerebral infarction, caused by blunt force trauma to the head. This trauma had caused a stroke, resulting in severe brain damage. Aniya had been unable to speak or move due to the injuries sustained. But the report didn't stop there. It also revealed that malnutrition played a significant role in her death. At the time of her passing, Aniya weighed only 26 pounds, a shocking and devastating sign of extreme neglect. The forensic pathologist who examined Aniya's body also discovered that she had been paralyzed due to the brain damage, unable to use the right side of her body. This trauma had affected her ability to eat, talk, and move, indicating a child who had been suffering silently for weeks, if not months. The damage to Aniya's body was so severe that it was clear she had been starving. Her body had begun to consume itself. Her pancreas was inflamed, and her lungs showed signs of collapse. Her stomach lining had ulcerated from prolonged exposure to acid due to lack of food, and her muscle tissue had wasted away, leaving her frail body unable to function properly. The final ruling on Aniya's death, a homicide caused by blunt force trauma and compounded by starvation. But that's not all. Earlier that day, just hours before the call to 911, surveillance footage confirmed that Sierra and Deontay were enjoying their meal at Chipotle, eating burritos while Aniya lay in the apartment, unconscious and dying. The couple even took the time to go shopping for cleaning supplies at Walmart, appearing completely detached from the gravity of Aniya's condition. After Aniya's death, Sierra Day was brought in for questioning. Detectives hoped to get to the truth, but Sierra's answers were filled with contradictions. She initially admitted that she had delayed medical treatment for Aniya, but her reasoning was bizarre and far from remorseful. Sierra claimed that Aniya had been faking illness in the days leading up to her death, refusing to acknowledge the severity of the child's suffering. The more Sierra spoke, the more it became apparent that she was trying to shift blame away from herself. In a particularly disturbing statement, Sierra suggested that Aniya had scared herself to death, as if the 4-year-old child's tragic demise was somehow her own fault. This complete lack of empathy was disturbing. Instead of taking responsibility for the neglect and abuse she had allowed, Sierra tried to minimize the horror of what had happened to Aniya, all while shifting the blame to others, particularly Deontay. Next, Deontay Lewis was interrogated. Initially, Deontay denied any responsibility, claiming that he had not been involved in any neglect. But as the interview went on, inconsistent statements between him and Sierra began to reveal a pattern of lies. Their conflicting accounts painted a picture of mutual guilt. Both were complicit in what had happened to Aniya. Despite his initial denials, it was clear from the investigation that Deontay had been an active participant in the abuse. His calm demeanor during the questioning was in stark contrast to the brutality Aniya had suffered. Finally, on March 12, 2018, Sierra Day and Deontay Lewis were arrested. They were both charged with murder, aggravated murder, felonious assault, child endangerment, and tampering with evidence. The couple's cold indifference to Aniya's death, the blatant lies during their interrogations, and the overwhelming evidence led to their charges. But despite the charges, there was no sense of remorse. The trial of Sierra Day and Deontay Lewis began in early 2019. The prosecution presented an overwhelming case: witness testimonies, photographs of Aniya's injuries, medical records showing the extent of the abuse, and the damning surveillance footage of the couple dining at Chipotle and shopping at Walmart while Aniya lay dying at home. This footage revealed their complete disregard for Aniya's life, further cementing the charge of criminal indifference to the child's well-being. Testimonies from daycare workers, first responders, and family members provided vivid accounts of the abuse and neglect Aniya had suffered over the months. Daycare workers testified about the visible injuries they had observed on Aniya's body, while first responders recounted the horrific sight of her emaciated, lifeless body. Family members, including Day-Garrett, spoke emotionally about the they had witnessed and how the system had failed to protect Aniya. Michael's testimony was a raw, gut-wrenching account of a father who was helpless in protecting his child. He expressed how much it hurt to see his daughter suffer, knowing that he had been denied the opportunity to step in and save her when she needed him the most.
A new development to tell you about in the case of 4-year-old Aniya Day-Garrett. Today, her mother and the mother's boyfriend pleaded not guilty to aggravated murder, child abuse, and other charges. And we uncovered disturbing new details about how the system that was supposed to protect this little girl failed.
At the conclusion of the trial, the verdict was clear. Sierra Day and Deontay Lewis were found guilty on all charges. The judge, visibly moved by the tragic details of the case, sentenced Sierra Day to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her complete disregard for the life of her own child, coupled with her disturbing statements and lack of remorse, led to the harshest sentence possible. Deontay Lewis was sentenced to life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after 20 years. His actions, while equally horrific, were considered to have been somewhat influenced by his relationship with Sierra, though his role in the abuse was undeniable. Also, in an effort to hold the system accountable, Michael filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services, CCFS, accusing them of gross negligence and failure to intervene. The case of Aniya Day-Garrett sparked a wave of public outrage and calls for change. Activists, child protection advocates, and concerned citizens began to push for legislative reforms to hold child protection services accountable. The community demanded better oversight and more effective intervention in cases of suspected abuse, making it clear that children's lives should never again be overlooked. In June 2020, Michael Garrett was awarded $3 million in damages in a wrongful death lawsuit for his daughter's death.
Garrett, who was fighting for custody when his daughter died, says he will continue to fight for justice for Aniya and other children.
We just want to make sure we bring change here in our community to protect our children. We want to bring change all around the world. We want to make sure we bring awareness to the Aniya law.
The award also sent a message: the system must be held accountable for their inaction. More importantly, it underscored the need for reform in how abuse cases are handled, so that children in similar situations could be protected before it was too late. The case of Aniya Day-Garrett was not just a tragedy. It was a call to action for change, one that would continue to echo in the fight for justice and reform. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded of the critical importance of paying attention to the warning signs, the bruises, the quiet behavior, the whispers of a child's suffering. Ignoring them costs more than a child's life. It costs the opportunity to protect other children who are crying out for help right now. And that brings us to the end of this case, a story so disturbing it leaves you questioning how many other children are suffering in silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Should more people have been held accountable? Let us know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching,